Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the last Sunday message for October. And today I want to talk about the occultism behind Black Lives Matter. But first, let me begin with the religious poll, where Americans were asked if they believe in Satan or not, whether they believe there is a real figure or not. So this was the question the Americans were asked recently, not too long ago. Satan is not a living being, but a symbol of evil. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Just a symbolic figure, not a real entity. And it turns out that the vast majority of Americans agree with this statement. 59% say that Satan is just a symbol, not a real being. And 26% only disagree with this statement. Only 26% of Americans, Christians, got it right. Only 26%. Now turns out that most don't believe he's a real entity, a real being who roams around the universe, our earth, doing evil things. No, they think, in fact, he's just a symbolic representation of evil. And yet, the title Satan occurs 53 times in 47 verses in the Bible. Even Jesus Christ repeatedly, throughout his 3 years of ministry, repeatedly talked about Satan. Again and again and again. Not to mention that the Bible even talks about fallen demons or fallen angels. So not only is there Satan, but there's also a bunch of demons out there in the world. Now, in the past, I've talked about portals or gateways or doorways where you can essentially invite a demon or demons into your life, and that we, as Christians, we need to avoid these portals so that we do not invite a demon into our life. And this is the ways I've talked about in the past that we can invite a demon into your life. Through drugs, the use of drugs, drunkenness, pornography, and certain types of music that we listen to, even certain types of movies dealing with satanic themes or witchcraft, can all ultimately open a portal for demons to come into your life. But the number one, or the largest portal opening, and where we can invite a demon into our life, is by practicing the occult. Practicing the occult. And this includes Ouija boards, seances, tarot cards, fortune telling, and spiritism. Some of the ways in which we can invite demons into our lives. And not only that, but when you engage with the occult, that can also lead to demonic possession. It doesn't necessarily mean that every time you do these things, automatically you're going to become demonically possessed, but it can lead to demonic possession. There's a reason why we need to be very careful that we're not engaged with the occult. Let me share with you a major French Catholic study on exorcism. So they were trying to determine what were the leading factors that led to demonic possession among exorcists working in the Catholic Church in France. And these were the reasons, these are the top 3 reasons why they ultimately concluded led to demonic possession. So 18% had religious problems such as possessions, pacts with the devil, curses, and diabolical apparitions. 15% suffered from depression linked to loneliness, abortion, false guilt feelings, and death tendency. And finally, a whopping majority, 31%, nearly 1/3 of all cases, had engaged in witchcraft, spiritism, or related activities. 31%. And speaking about spiritism, that's usually what it means is when you contact the dead. And this has been going on since, it was really popular, became popular in the 19th century. And this also could include seances. So it's a big no-no for us to try to contact the dead. And in fact, one of the earliest examples of spiritism is found in the Bible, found in the Old Testament, found in 1 Samuel chapter 28, which I've discussed in the past, where Saul, the first king of Israel, was in the middle of a war, and he wanted to get some sort of advice or counsel, and it turns out his prophet Samuel had already passed away. So he went on disguise, went to the witch of Endor, and asked her to contact Samuel the prophet, who was already dead. And sure enough, she was able to bring back Samuel from the dead. And Samuel essentially told them what he had done was wrong and evil, and that God was going to punish him, and that God was going to ultimately cause his death. That he was going to die for what he has done, for all his sins. And sure enough, everything came to pass. But again, the Bible makes it very clear that we're not supposed to be engaged with the occult, and we're not supposed to be engaged with spiritism. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 to 12. And do not let your people practice fortune-telling or sorcery, or allow them to interpret omens, or engage in witchcraft, or cast spells, or function as mediums, or psychics, or call forth the spirits of the dead. Spiritism. And anyone who does these things is an object of horror and disgust to the Lord. So you can see there's very strong language against being engaged with the occult. And the reason why God makes this prohibition is because he knows that we can ultimately become possessed by demons. We can invite demons into life when we engage in these practices. That's the reason why it's a big no-no. So here's the controversy behind Black Lives Matter, which I was not aware of initially. But in the last few weeks, I've been reading stuff, seeing stuff, and I thought, oh, this is no good. This is no good at all. And I want to clarify this. There's nothing wrong fighting for racial equality in this nation. Nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with fighting against racial discrimination or racism in this nation. Nothing wrong with that at all. So I'm not disputing that at all. But I am disputing what the leaders are all about. In fact, fighting for racial equality and trying to fight against racism in the nation, that was the original work of Martin Luther King Jr. God bless his soul. He advocated to be done in a peaceful manner. And ultimately, even though he died for the cause, he was successful, because that led to the passage from Congress of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So ultimately, he was successful in his approach trying to fight for racial equality. But here's the problem. The problem is that the founders, several leaders within the movement, are definitely engaged with the occult, engaged with spiritism, where they contact the dead. We have Alicia Garza, Patrice Colors, I'm not just sure how I pronounce the name, Opal Tometi. And again, some of them are involved with the occult and involved with spiritism. And here's the proof. Here's a discussion that took place. I don't know when this actually took place, even though the YouTube video says September 23rd, but it could have taken place even before all that. A discussion between Melina Abdullah and Patrice, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. Now, Melina, it turns out, she's a PhD professor from Cal State in Los Angeles. An educated woman, no less. And she's also one of the founding members of Black Lives Matter in Los Angeles, from the chapter in Los Angeles. So, not too long ago, they were having a discussion. And it turns out they're talking about spiritism. They're talking about how they are conjuring up the spirit of all those victims, trying to bring them back to life and talk to them so they could be inspired to carry out their work. So, again, listen to what they have to say to each other about this subject and judge for yourselves.
We do feel like when we say the names, right? So we speak their names, we say her name, say their names. We do that all the time, that you kind of invoke that spirit, and then those spirits actually become present with you, right? And so as I was listening to you, there's two pieces in the prayer that really stood out for me with regard to this. One is as your voice breaks, right? When you talk about his family and all of the Black people in Brunswick, Georgia. But two is when you say, and Ahmad, like that's your homie, right? like you're just talking to, your friend that that's with you. And I think it really illustrates what it is you're saying, because we do that often. Some of, and maybe I'm sharing too much, but we become very intimate with the spirits that we call on regularly, right? Like each of them seems to have a different presence and personality. I laugh a lot with Waukesha, and I didn't meet her in her body, right? I met her through this work. So I just want you to kind of speak to that a little bit, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I was always someone who almost obsessed about our ancestors, Black ancestors in particular. I wasn't raised with honoring ancestors necessarily. I was raised Jehovah's Witness, a little bit opposite of that. And as I got older and started to feel like I was missing something, ancestral worship became really important. And as you know, the Fowler Museum is so important because it has a bunch of West African traditional pieces inside that museum. And it was one of the first museums that I went to that was speaking directly to African spirituality. So for me, as we started to lift up the names of our folks in the last 7 years, in some ways, even before Trayvon with Oscar Grant, I started to feel personally connected and responsible and accountable to them, both from a deeply political place, but also from a deeply spiritual place. And always, in my tradition, you offer things that your loved one who passed away would want, whether it's like honey or tobacco or things like that. And it's so important, not just for us to be in direct relationship to our people who've passed, but also for them to know we've remembered them. I believe so many of them work through us.
So here we have Abdullah talking about her experiences, and even talking about the fact that she's been talking with Waukesha, happened to be a victim, and even laughing with her. And that she says these different spirits have different personalities. How does she know she's actually talking to Waukesha? How does she actually know that for a fact? She doesn't know that for a fact. Who's to say that God's going to allow a spirit to come from heaven to talk to her? No, absolutely ridiculous. More likely that she's talking with a demon masquerading herself as Waukesha. And again, this is all about spiritism, which is a big no-no. We should not be trying to contact with dead, deceased spirits. And then we also have Patrice also talking about the fact she's also does it, and she's also engaged with ancestral worship. Come on, can't be worshiping your ancestors. The only one you should be worshiping is God and God alone. If your loved ones make it to heaven, that's great. They become saints in heaven, but not that we're supposed to be worshiping them at all. It's a big no-no. And she also talks about how she's even offering gifts to the deceased. This is something in the Americas where they do this. They call that Santeria. And of course, the practice of Santeria goes back to Africa. It's a big no-no. We shouldn't be doing this at all. And like they can somehow receive these gifts. Think about it. If they're spiritual beings, they have no use for anything of this earth. What they have in heaven, if they make it to heaven, is far greater than what they could possibly receive on this earth. So it's ridiculous to be offering gifts to people who have already been deceased, or to be worshiping our ancestors. Absolutely ridiculous. Now someone may say to me, oh, you're being judgmental. But the truth is not relative. Truth is not relative. Truth is absolute. And there's only one path to the truth. There are not many paths to the truth, because my truth contradicts her truth, and her truth contradicts my truth. We both cannot be right. So only Jesus Christ, as the founder of a religion, saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No other religious founder ever spoke those words. So yes, truth is absolute, and that's false, and it's wrong. And they should not be engaged in, because if they're doing that, they ultimately could be bringing or inviting demons into their lives. That's the fact. That's what happens when you do these things. Now in the Bible, not only condemn such practice, as we have already seen from Deuteronomy, but the Bible also makes it very clear in the book of Revelation that people who are engaged with witchcraft or with the occult can ultimately lose their souls. They can lose their souls and end up in hell for it. Listen to what we told in Revelation chapter 21, verse 8. But I tell you what will happen to cowards and to everyone who is unfaithful or dirty-minded, or who murders, or who is sexually immoral, or who uses witchcraft or the occult, or worships idols or tells lies. They will be thrown into that lake of fire and burning sulfur. This is the second death. So it's a severe warning not to be engaged with the occult. Because again, you'll be inviting demons into your life, and then they can ultimately drag your soul into hell. And I'm sure that's what will make them very happy. Here, this is not related to Black Lives Matter, but we even members of the Antifa group are also involved with the occult. I saw this video. It's a 1-minute video. I thought about sharing this with you, but I can't, because not only is it disgusting what he does, but at the same time he's cussing, so I really can't. But these two you see in the video. This person, I don't know if it's a woman or a guy, and this guy. Not only do they perform some sort of ritual, but they go around dancing, and they start yelling out Kali Ma, which is one of the goddesses of Hinduism. And it also begins to chant the phrase, God of Chaos, invoking the God of Chaos. Of course, there's no such thing as a God of Chaos or Kali Ma, no. But there are demons of chaos, and in fact, Satan is the God of chaos. Invoking demons. That's what they're doing. And this is a big no-no. We should not be doing this at all. So there's definitely some demonic infestation with these movements. And the truth of the matter is that Satan is trying to destroy the human race. And sometimes he does it with false teachings and false doctrines. This is what we told in Revelation 12, verse 12, which we've seen before. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who live in the heavens rejoice, but terror will come on earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you in great anger, knowing he has a little time. That's what he has. He has a very little time left. This is the reason why we're seeing all this chaos in a nation within the world. Of course, believers, we are protected. God will protect us with his holy angels, and we're protected from demons. And in fact, Jesus Christ made it very clear when he lived on this earth that greater is he that is in you, the Holy Spirit of God, than he that is in the world, Satan. God is greater than Satan. Therefore, that's why he will protect us with his Holy Spirit. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. But you belong to God, my dear children. You have already won the victory over those people, because the spirit who lives in you is greater than the spirit who lives in the world. Sorry, this is the Apostle John who spoke these words, not Jesus Christ. But in any case, Jesus also made it very clear that a bad tree produces bad fruit. A bad tree produces bad fruit, and only a good tree produces good fruit. So if your foundation is based on falsehood and based on false doctrines and false teachings and demonic teachings, then the fruit that you're going to produce is not going to be good, and it's not going to last, and it's not going to work. That's just the way it is. And not only that, but it's also very clear that the leaders are trained Marxists, communists here in America. That's what they're advocating. We all know communism doesn't work. Look at Russia. It failed. China also failed. Communism failed to the point they have to embrace a capitalist economy. Look at North Korea. Look at Cuba. Look at Venezuela. So socialism and communism does not work. This is what they want. This is what they're advocating. But again, they are trained Marxists, according to one of the co-founders. Here's a proof of this. Here's a short clip where she's talking to this individual, where she is defining her ideology and trying to defend her point of view. They're saying it does have structure. It does have a foundation, what we believe, and it's based upon Marxism. So this is about a minute, almost a minute and a half long. But judge for yourselves.
Concerned that there's a lack of perhaps ideological direction in Black Lives Matter that would allow it to fizzle out, as he said, in comparison to Occupy Wall Street. As you are advanced in your own organization, as you all are headed to Cleveland to participate in this Black Lives Movement conference, how do you respond to that particular critique? Again, a loving critique from an elder of the struggle that some others share, that I've even shared as well, to be frank, as a concern about, in part because of the co-optation and the appropriation, that a more clear ideological structuring might be of some value here. But how do you respond to those kinds of, again, loving criticisms?
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
So you heard it for yourself. We, including herself and Alicia, co-founders of Black Lives Matter, we are trained Marxists. Trained Marxists. You know, again, false teachings. False teachings. Teachings that do not work. It will never work. Again, communism is a failure. It's ridiculous trying to implement this for our nation. And yet, this is what people are following nowadays. False teachings inspired by demons, as far as I'm concerned. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, where Paul told us what would happen in the latter days, in the end times. The Holy Spirit clearly says that in the last days, some people will leave the faith. They will follow spirits that will fool them. They will believe things that demons will teach them. That's exactly what's going on with the leaders of this movement. They're following false teachings inspired by demons. And not only that, but they also teach and believe. Then on the front page, preparing for the sermon, I saw this on the front page. And this was supposed, I guess, October 18, 2020, a video where they're advocating that black women are divine. Black women are divine. How ridiculous and ludicrous is that, to suggest that black women are divine? No, they're not. No woman are divine. No man are divine. The only one who was divine on this earth was Jesus Christ. God made in the human flesh. That's it. He's the only one. So we're not divine. We will never be divine. So it's ridiculous to even suggest that. But this is what they're teaching. This is what they're promoting. Again, false teachings. And that's not all. That's not all. This is something also got them into a lot of trouble. About the role of males. It seems like they have an anti-view of males. This is my impression looking at their website and everything I saw from the website and the videos I saw. Anti-view of males. But they actually even say, you know what, we don't need males. We don't need fathers in the equation when we're raising our children. We don't need fathers in the equation when we're raising our children. And that got into so much trouble because when people began to talk about it, they deleted it from their website. Gone. In fact, when I went back this past week, I saw it was gone. But, you know, it turns out on the internet, nothing ever is automatically erased because you can find anything on the Internet Archive. And then from there, I was able to get the quote itself. If you don't believe me, you can look it up yourselves. But this is what they deleted from their website. And it was there for the longest time. This is the quote. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, not fathers, parents and children are comfortable. So they're against the nuclear family structure where you have a father and a mother, husband and wife, raising their children. They're against this. They say, you know what, we should, the village can raise the children. It takes a village to raise a child. This is something that Hillary Clinton advocated from the book a while back ago. It's ridiculous. No, you need a father and a mother to raise that child or raise your children. And when the father is in the equation, those children will grow up to become well-adjusted and then more likely will become successful in society. If you get rid of the father from the equation, your children, those children will grow up all kinds of problems and they're more likely to become criminals later on in life, according to research. So no, we don't need to be against the nuclear family. We need to be promoting the nuclear family. As a matter of fact, I talked about this in my sermon, Our Broken Nation. I think it was back in June when I first talked about this. I was looking at crime in America. And so I think it's worth repeating again what I shared in that sermon. Let me show you some important facts about crime in America. Here's the thing. Poverty does not lead to crime. I'll say it again, poverty does not lead to crime. Instead, the biggest predictor to crime in America is children who come from broken homes, children who grow up in homes where there's no father figure, or they grow up without their biological fathers. That's the biggest predictor to crime in America. Not poverty, but children who grow up without their biological father. Here's an article from The Atlantic, which is, this is mainstream media. This is not a conservative magazine by any stretch of imagination. It's typical liberal mainstream press. But they looked at this back in December of 2012. So let me show you a quote from the article itself. Controlling for income and other factors, youth in father-absent families, mother only, mother and stepfather, and relatives and others who are trying to raise that child, like grandmothers trying to raise a child, still has significantly higher odds of incarceration than those from mother-father families. Did you see that? Did you get that? So again, it's not poverty that leads to crime, but instead is the fact that children are being raised by their moms or by their relatives, and they're not being raised by their biological father. That's the biggest contributor to crime in America, and for them to end up in prison. Here's a quote from Fixed Family Courts, also arrived at the same conclusion that was quoted in the Atlantic article. Here's a quote. The strongest predictor of whether a person will end up in prison is that they were raised by a single parent. The proportion of single-parent household in a community predicts its rate of violent crime and burglary. But the community's poverty level does not. Does not. So if they're poor, they got mom and dad in the equation, most likely they're not going to become criminals. After controlling for single motherhood, the difference between black and white crime rates disappeared. So again, once you get rid of the equation of fathers not being in the picture, and those children will most likely not become criminals. But if the father is not in the picture, in the equation, raising those children, then most likely they will become criminals later on when they grow up. And not to mention, more likely lead to drug abuse, alcohol abuse, etc., etc. So again, the last thing that we need to do is getting rid of the nuclear family. Instead, we need to be striving for it and aiming for it. And this is not just an African-American problem. This is also a Hispanic problem as well in our culture, my culture as a Hispanic, where too many fathers are not staying in the equation, not staying in the picture, not staying married to the mother of the children, and abandoning the children. And that's causing all kinds of problems in our culture. And this is not acceptable. So we need to make sure as fathers that we remain in the equation, remain in the marriage, and we raise our children. So again, we need to be striving for the nuclear family and not getting rid of it, imagining somehow the village is going to raise the child. No, it's not. It's not. It doesn't work. The church can play a role in raising the child along with the father. So I believe it's the nuclear family along with the church that can ultimately raise successful, well-adjusted children in our society. So again, we need to be very careful against false teachers and false teachings. Even if the world should embrace it, we need to reject it and say, no, this is wrong, and this is wrong because of this or that. Not embrace it, challenge it, and say, no, it's wrong. Especially what they believe in Spiritism and Marxism and getting rid of nuclear family. Absolutely ridiculous and absurd. Indeed, as you know, as most Christians know, that our ultimate battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the dark forces of the universe. And so we need to make sure that we are walking with Christ on a daily basis so we can fight these demonic forces of the universe and ultimately be victorious in this world. Let's make sure we stay on the right path and follow correct teachings and follow right teachings and follow the teachings that are found in the Bible from the only divine man who ever lived. Those are the teachings we should be following, not what so-and-so and so-and-so may think or advocate, even if they got a fancy PhD degree. Absolutely not. So I want to end it with this. This is from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, from the Apostle St. Paul. Our fight is not against people on earth or against flesh and blood, We're fighting against the rulers and the authorities and the powers of this world's darkness. We are fighting against the spiritual powers of evil in the heavenly world. So again, let's make sure that we're putting on the armor of Christ so that we can resist all false teachings and resist all false demonic beings. And that the people of God say, amen and amen. So again, for those of you from St. Matthew, we still need your financial support. The vast majority are not coming to church because of the pandemic. You know, and I don't blame them. They're trying to stay safe, and the number of church family members have gotten the virus in the last few weeks. So people are trying to stay safe, but we still need your financial support so we can function in the church. So thank you for those who've been supporting the church. I really appreciate it. And again, for those of you who can come, we're open at 11 o'clock on Sundays, and we are practicing social distances, and we're being very safe as we have our services. So God bless you all, and hope you all have a great and wonderful week. God bless you all. Bye.